All right, Billy, we're live. Welcome back, man. Every other Thursday, Jeff Robertson, Billy Ferguson getting together. I put a little title with it today, Billy. Here's what I come up with. I was sitting in my thoughts, and it's live on the Second Chance podcast: business, leadership, and lessons learned.
All
How about
right.
that? How about
That's
that?
that just sounds really professional there, Jeff.
Yeah. If um, we got a little bit of all three though. It's what I was thinking. I was like sitting finding something that was going to ring through the title there of tonight, and so it's like I was trying to find a closure. And I was like lessons learned. So tell me what you got any good news going on this week?
Well, I'm feeling good. I went to the cardiologist the other day and got a good report, so that's all. That's always good when you go to the doctor, and it's good there. So hopefully that lasts. But no big disasters this week that I've heard about. So I think that's all good. And what about you?
Have you had any work in the last 2 weeks? Any
I have. I'm working on a local municipality's emergency operations plan. I'm about ready to finish up on that, and I've also got some reached out to another locality, and they're supposed to get back with me. And the locality I'm working on right now is giving me a couple other projects to work on. So you see, yeah, that's going real well, and
so all government?
all governments so
Yeah.
far. I want to work with you on how we can kind of you know manipulate that around to get into some private sector. I'm really excited about the circus comes to town because I think that's one that we can really utilize to get into to the private sector. And I was watching a program the other day, and I was going to try to remember that, tell you what it was, but it was kind of like what you and I have talked about before, that we're ingrained in stuff and we think it's kind of mundane, but other people love to hear
Yeah.
that story. So I think
I
that's
never, Billy, I never realized because I started to, I took a lot of things for granted. And I try to speak openly about that now, but I never, all that stuff kind of brushes through because you don't want to carry an ego of all the cool stuff that we got to do. We got to do some really cool stuff.
oh, absolutely,
Um,
absolutely.
and so, but you always kind of just let it brush off because I never wanted to be like, oh, guess what I did today. But other people are like, holy smokes, you blow their mind.
Well, I see that a lot of times you go out and I was at dinner last night, and it was another family member there with me and my wife, and we got to talking about just really how the political climate is today, and with the Doge, and we were talking about jobs. And this person worked for the federal government, and they wasn't sure their job was going to be safe, and they was asking me about the consulting stuff that I'm doing and how I got into it, and you know, it was like that question turned into a 30-minute conversation
Yeah.
of how how did you get your first gig, how did you advertise, and how did it work, and how did you same conversation you and I have had. How much do you charge? How do you know when to charge or when not to? The same type stuff. And I'm sitting in Taco Bell, and like I said, this one question turned into a 30-minute conversation, and we even left it, hey, we need to talk some more about this and everything.
Same stuff you and I did. But here's, and I tell you, I love to help you with this because I overlooked it. But we carry with your experience, we don't put dollar values on that. And when I podcast, I tell everyone I'm 12th grade education. Um, we could probably count that as 10 because I just barely skated through because I was in EMS, but that came really easy to me. So all of my other skills, my college degree came through my public safety experience and then later my business experience. So we sometimes overlook, well, I don't have a degree or I don't have this. So we get a little bit of imposter syndrome that goes back to that. I don't want to carry this heavy ego about all the cool stuff that I did because in your world, it wasn't such a big deal, but where it is another. So you carry a little bit of imposter syndrome and you devalue the information that you bring to the table. And that's something I've worked hard to really communicate to you with.
And I can relate to that. It I can remember coming up and he, probably even before you and I knew each other, and going through programs, and later on people would, and here it goes sound egotistical, but people go, well, how did you learn this stuff? You must be the smartest person in the world. And I'm like, no, I do this every day.
Yeah.
It's not a day that I don't go by and I don't read something, watch a commercial, look at an article, in my chosen profession, and I still do that. So it's like, it's not that I'm smart. It reminds me of an old analogy. I was talking to a guy one day, and he was a musician, and he was telling me that he was having a conversation with somebody one day and said this was the best piano player he ever saw in his life, and said he told this piano player, he said, I'd give anything to be able to play that piano like you do. And said the guy said, would you give 8 hours a day every day of your life? Because
Yeah.
that's how I play that piano 8 hours a day every day of my life for practice. So I do get that. And you was talking about the imposter syndrome. I've had conversations with people, and I'm sure you saw this being in law enforcement. It was like that it was hard to go to Walmart or hard to go to Kroger because people knew what you did. And if they
Yeah.
saw a police car go down the road with blue lights on, or an ambulance go with red lights on, they thought you knew everything about that call and stuff. And then you had to explain it to three different people. And then one answer led to another. Well, it was a wreck down there. Well, who was it? How bad was
It
it hurt?
was.
Well,
Yeah.
it's like, and after a while, you end up going to Walmart in the middle of the night or Kroger in the middle of the night, so you don't have to put up with that. And I told my wife one day, and I'm certainly not comparing you and I to celebrities, but I can understand why when, Dale Earnhardt walks through a crowd somewhere and you got 10,000 people yelling at you. I go through Walmart and you just got two ask you about the wreck. After a while, it gets aggravating. So I can see how that sometimes those folks may come across as a little rude when it's not meant to be. It's just that you get tired of hearing that same question. I'll tell you a funny story about that. I was getting a haircut one day, and it was this lady that I knew for quite some time, and we had a relationship that I could say stuff like this, and I know you can relate to this because you know the area here. And she was asking me, she said, "Well, I saw this ambulance go through Redwood the other day." She says, "Where were they going?" And I called her by name. I said, "Paula, you work at Ply Gym, don't you?" She said, "Yeah." She says, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I seen this Ply Gym tractor trailer going down 220 the other day. Where were they going?" She said, "Well, I don't know where they're going." I said, "Why do you think I know where that ambulance was going?" I don't listen to that 24/7. And even when I do, you know how it was. It gets where it's in one ear and out the other. But you could tune in to what was really, really important there. So,
I can't. When I start a conversation, sometimes it's hard for me to be quiet. So I lose. If I go to walk, that happens to me. I lose 30 minutes. So sometimes I'm just trying to avoid it to get in and get out. Because
yeah.
if someone asks me that, I'm like, well, how you doing? And next thing you know, you done killed 30 minutes of your time, and you're behind, and all those things too. But it goes back to something we had said in one of the earlier episodes about just the community leadership that you have in public safety and you have in EMS. And it leads into two conversations I love talking about. Um, where we're from, you live and work amongst your clients, and so your best friend. You're working an accident with your best friend in it, and or your the kids nowadays. Kids that go to school with your kids, and families upon families, and there's a certain level of accountability comes from that. But I was talking to a police officer from Milwaukee the other day, and they, they lived. They didn't send their kids to the same school, and they lived in a different part of town. They still lived in the city, but like they had lived in a different area. So it was they were left, and there's so many people there. But then when you look at other areas where you don't you live somewhere else and then work in an adjacent city, so you're able to kind of leave all that positive and negative of your job in the city that you work and come home and be a family person or mom, dad, whatever you need to be, but you don't bring that baggage. So for us growing up is when were in that role, it was 24/7. If you were out, you were associated with your job. You had conversations about it. You knew the people that you ended up, in whether it's law enforcement or public safety. If you knew the person's house that burnt down. and they were friends in a lot of cases, and it impacted us, twofold, because not only are you having to deal with the incident, but you got the personal connection with the people involved.
Yeah, and I definitely see that, and I like just to add on to that. I think that a lot of times that by doing that, you don't realize the impact you had on somebody's life, because I can't tell you the times I've had people come up and call me by my name and tell me that, well, yeah, you picked me up in that wreck back in 1983, and I was down, and I'm like, I'm sitting there in my mind, and I'm going like, who is this? And because I had a contact with that person for 5 minutes or 30 minutes at the most, but it
Yeah.
was a life altering event on their side. They wrecked the car or the house burnt down or whatever, and 30 minutes after that call, I was on to something else, and it really never resonates with you. But in law enforcement, public safety, and lots of other jobs too. But I think more importantly than it's I don't want to say our jobs is more important, but I don't see a librarian or the tax collector having that impact that we have. Because a lot of times when we show up, and law enforcement is a little bit different, but fire and EMS shows up on your worst day.
Yeah.
They don't never show up on a good day, and law enforcement is pretty much the same way. And in my previous job, I was supervisor of animal control. Also, nope, the animal control officers don't show up to give Fido an award for the cutest puppy in the
Right.
county. They go show up for somebody that's called and complained.
Yeah.
And it's the same way with us. I'm going to show up when your house is burning down or you're having a heart attack. And law enforcement's a little bit different, but not a whole lot. I mean, the blue lights come on, it ain't pulling you over to give you the best driving award. It's for something
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. Very seldom in those cases is law enforcement cheered. Even once you're just as it's saying, most time you get into those hotbed domestic situations. By the time you start resolving it, everybody's done turned on you.
Absolutely. Yep. Well, from
Um,
what I understand, statistics, that's the biggest threat to law enforcement is on
yeah.
domestic calls and everything. And we would have the same thing to some extent, and that plays on your mental health. And I know that's close to your heart. And I think that
Yeah.
sometimes that we may not call it PTSD, but I think it. I, I know things that I've seen in my career that I could sit right here and tell you things 25 years ago that just as good like it happened yesterday, and it has to be ingrained in your brain there somewhere. Whether it be good, it's not all bad. Some of it is good, but you know, in retrospect, I wouldn't change it for the world. I've had a great career and still having it. Just trying to
You,
expand it into other avenues right now.
you will hear that, Billy, referred to as a moral injury. Um, where we're not quite PTSD, where we're not quite PTSD, we're not quite, um, but we've had something that has affected us. In this case, we're talking about. Hang on a second. I'm going to show you. You see that? Here we go.
I just popped up. Yeah.
Yeah. So look, this was remember me telling you about Kenny Mitchell,
Yeah. Okay.
Chesapeake, right? He
Right.
does the event on um, oh shucks, Operation Yellow Tape,
You're right.
and
Absolutely.
his speaker was Rob Swan, and basically Rob Swan broke it down, and the more he was talking, I was like, wait a minute, man. So right here, and I'll link this in here as well, but this is a um, right here's kind of what a moral injury is. Simply put, moral injury happens when you engage in, witness, or fail to prevent actions that go against your core values or belief. It's not the shock or fear that PTSD brings. It's the overwhelming guilt, shame, or betrayal of your own moral code. So anyway, he was talking about that, and this one was, it doesn't happen because you made a bad decision. It's your personal ethics. If you think about the soldier who's ordered to engage in combat knowing innocent civilians might be harmed, or the police officer who has to stand down the situation where intervention feels like the right move, but the law says otherwise. And then I throw it in some different things along just on the undercover side, things that you see, and um, but I think EMS is exposed to everybody, law enforcement, EMS, both are exposed to a tremendous amount of life and death.
Absolutely, absolutely more than Well, I don't want to say every decision is made, but a lot of the decisions is made involve life or death, right?
Yeah, I can't who was I was talking to a guy that like manufactures for a living today, and we were just talking about. He was talking about how sometimes people don't get his job, and I'm like, "Nah, I understand what you do." And he's like, "Well, you're a business coach. How you know that?" And I'm like, I do law enforcement." And I said, you can't put the bullets back in the gun. I said, just like lives depend on you getting your manufacturing process right. So I understand you have high standards and you have, you cannot lower your standards to meet expectations because there's a lot of risk that's involved with this product being right. Um, so he was like, really, I never realized it. And I'm like, it's, you guys welding something together is no different than, bullets in a gun for law enforcement. And then in the EMS side, just your vehicles, right? You're not carrying guns, but man, you're still blaring down the road at high speeds and negotiating traffic and all that stuff.
Yeah, that kind of segues into what I had spoken about earlier about transition from the public safety environs to the business environs on like media attention. So one way, I think we have the advantage because even though we're not out in front of the media every day, we kind of got it in the back of our head that we could be in front of the media every day. We're the guy that's doing manufacturing or the person that's driving the school bus or whatever it may be. They don't probably never cross their mind, even though it could happen. And I think that that's where that we've all got to be prepared to think that 5 minutes from now, I can be in front of a camera trying to explain where this is, and like I said, kind of segueing into that, you've got to be prepared because there's going to be a story on the 6 o'clock news tonight, whether you told that story or whether you know Aunt Ethel down at the Exxon station told that story, because that's their job is to get that story, and they're going to keep trying till somebody talks to them. And I think it's better that you get out in front of it, and you can make the media your friend, or they can be one of your worst enemies.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's good to build relationships with those folks, and just without tipping my hand here with some of the things that lessons learned that I've been involved in is so we go to this car accident or we go to this plane crash or whatever, you know, media is going to show up. So let's keep in the back of our head what we can do. So let's set up before they get here. So let's set up a media area. So now, and it can be, it ain't got to be nothing fancy. We can just say we're going to set up in the southeast corner of this field for this plane crash. But now you've got everybody corralled in an area. Now we've got the upper hand there, and let's make these guys as comfortable as we can. Let's make restroom access. Let's get them electrical connections if we can. Let's get them computer connections if they don't have it. Let's buy lunch if they're there for a long time. The more we do to that, they're human and have human thoughts and needs. So the more we can cater to that, the closer we're going to be to them, and the closer it is to making our story positive. So that's some of the things we talk about in the circus comes to town is how to accomplish that. Uh, I was listening to the radio the other day, and when I say the radio, a scanner type radio, and somebody's yelling about the media's down there, the media's down there, make sure they don't come up here. Well, that to me, that's not the way to handle that situation, because you know that wasn't a very good impression to the media, because they're there to do a job, and they're gonna do that job, whether it makes you look in a positive light or whether it
Yeah.
makes you look in a negative light, because the media really has a lot of a lot of I guess you say a lot of power, and with the freedom of speech, and they're protected in the Constitution. Where mind your job's not protected in the Constitution, but freedom of speech is there. So that goes back a long way, and it gives them a lot of just a lot of power there. So the more you can cater to them and make them your friend, and I'm not saying trying to put on, a facade to them, but really be true and make them your friend. Go out, before, call them into meetings before anything happens. I know you were a business owner, so call them into your business and do stuff. Here's what we do, and if you can, look at that as a positive, because if you can get that, it's a slow news night, and they're putting uh, something about, Jeff's, you know, used appliances, and they're there on, man, that's free advertising right there you're getting, and look at it that way. So I always tried to reach out and do stuff like that. Anytime I had something that was newsworthy, I mean, I literally had built relationships where I had the cell numbers of the reporters, and I called them
Yeah.
and say, hey, we're doing this next week, and you send somebody down. And a lot of times they say we'll do what we can, and nobody'd show up, and a lot of times they would show up. So I think that's what you need to do. And again, not to tip my hand in that, but just kind of, I thought what you said segued into that a little bit.
No, it does. But he also take me to a really great point is, I grew into that relationship. I wasn't comfortable with that younger in my career, but and I don't think when you go back to looking at some of that stuff as we weren't necessarily exposed to, wanted to. My leadership did not want us talking to the press at all. So there was never any training um, until later in life, and you realize, like what you said, everybody's trying to do a job. So I think what I would like to point out is, you know, in going through my own uncomfortableness, is I could totally admit me at some point in time saying, "Hey, don't let the media come up here," because I don't want to talk to them because I probably wasn't authorized to. But even if I was, um, until later on, I didn't have the comfort in just my training and mentorship and people being like, "Hey, don't. It's not bad. Just facts don't lie. Tell it, tell it like it needs to be told." Kind of like us sitting here now and recording live and just putting our thoughts out there on different situations. But I think what I'd love to see. Do you remember Kristen Chapin, Kristen Purdue? She ran at City's PO for a handful of years.
No, I don't. I don't remember that name. Yeah.
She's been just someone. She came to our friends, and I think her husband's a lieutenant or captain in the city still. But anyway, just like she was a really good educator for me on just her job, and and just how she cultivated, just everything you just echoed. When you were talking about it, I was like, oh, that'd be a great guest. So I texted her and I was like, hey, I want you to come on and talk media with me and Billy one night because I think that would be a ton of value. So hopefully she's watching live because she just can't get enough of this YouTube channel. But and heard what I said. But I would love to because she has some really cool insights and just how she did her communications and things like that, and to the point of where she was working on a little bit of a course at one point in time to just help other folks like you're talking about that are uncomfortable with their media relationships and then their communication in general. So you're that's a phase that's something that got overlooked. It's not most of the time the what do we call them, the glory hounds, or they don't want just everybody talk to the media. So a lot of people get pushed out of that until it becomes very relevant in the moment, and then they don't know what to do.
Well, yes, and I think your position was a little bit different from mine because you work for an elected official, which
Yeah.
that may have reflected a little bit different. But I'll never forget a situation one time, and as far as I used to be uncomfortable talking to the media, and it was kind of like I had somebody tell me one time that just don't tell them anything that the general public couldn't see. So, if I'm at a wreck and, there's an ambulance there, and there's a helicopter there, and, there's a fire truck there, it's probably been a wreck here on 220, and they're already injured and will be transported to the hospital. Anybody riding by in a car can see that. So I've done my due diligence of speaking to the media. Uh, when instead of saying, here come the media, my thought would have been, okay, here comes the media, and where am I going to put them?
Yeah.
Not hold them down there and get them in this area. Can you talk right now? No, but I will come back to you in just a few minutes and do that, and then just give them what the public could see. and they're happy at that time. I think that they're just wanting a story to get on. Now, of course, they want as much information as they could give, but that may be all you can give them right now. And
Did
that always resonated with me when I was talking to the media is don't tell them nothing that the general public couldn't see.
and I don't, I know where we're talking about, they had a PIO, and a lot of the agencies do, but your size department with your budget, it's hard to allocate a PIO position to that, right?
Oh, absolutely. And Franklin County even today doesn't have even a county PIO. Now they have a gentleman that acts as the PIO, and he's a great guy and does a great job. But he's actually in another position. He's just that's just another duty is assigned. He's not a formally trained public information officer, and he's
He's got
actually
the
the
best
director of
voice.
tourism.
He's,
You know,
he's got the best voice. He's got the
yeah, he's
best
got the
voice.
best
The
voice
PIO.
and prettiest face, and goes out there and does it, and does a great job. I'm not belittling, does a fantastic job. He's a great guy, but it's not like somebody that's professionally trained. I know back, and we'll talk a little bit about the incident that brought up for the where I did the circus comes to town on that
Yeah.
incident. They actually that was such a big incident. They actually brought a PIO from the state police office in Richmond. It came up and they wrote all everything was said. They wrote the press releases. They talked. They weren't out there in front of the camera. The political figures still got out in front of the camera, but they were just reading what somebody else had written.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think they protected both sides there.
Yeah. Because you had just, you probably had, oh man, 20 agencies represented and something like that, 15 to 20 at
Oh,
least.
we
And just,
probably had, we probably had at least 20. We had everything from local fire and EMS to Homeland Security and CIA
yeah.
there, really FBI, Secret Service, all there. And then we had probably 50 or 60 media from the local news post in the local municipality to CNN and Fox and all your national networks and even international networks that were not on site but were calling in wanting to know because when something like that, especially in today's world, is even a little bit worse now. When something like that happens, within seconds, it's all over the world through social media and stuff. It was a while back. There was a school shooting. It was the last school shooting. I want to say it was in Tennessee, and I actually saw it on X before they ever put it on the news. I mean, like 5 or 10 minutes, and all of a sudden there's a Fox News pops up with a breaking news announcement. I'm like, well, I knew that 5 or 10 minutes ago. I mean, so it's just really out there. And again, you can make the media your friend or your foe, and then I think that's a good point to relay to not only governmental work like we did, but also to private business and private sector, maybe even a little more because they never expect something like that. So I think it's going to be a good program. We were finally able to get it out, and I think that'll be my segue into the private side a lot there.
The one thing I tell you too on your business to close that out, I got a couple things I want to ask you from leadership side on your business, and this is something to think about. When I was on the phone the other day working with a client out of Texas, and he and I were back and forth and running some ads. We're talking about this, and I was like, "Hey," he was looking for contractors. I'm like, "This is where you can find them." So think about this right now, where you're heavily into where a lot of your clients are government, but it's also one of those opportunities for your government clients to this is what I'd like to see you do is just take, and I can help you with this, is just let's put together an awareness flyer, something flyer, a Google Doc. It doesn't have to be anything, an email that has just an awareness and educating your government partners who not everybody's going to know that this is a requirement. When you get into your economic development areas, it's just something of a value that they could provide to other business owners. Just saying, "Hey, here's what Billy does. This is why if you're a business of this, these are the reasons why you need it." but what you might be able to do is have we may be able to get your economic development or someone like to host you to come in and have businesses, pay you to train up all at the same time or whatever that might evolve. But I think what I would not hesitate at all to create some value and a little bit of awareness type content to provide with your government partners that you're working with now to say, hey, this is something that applies to the businesses in your area as well. And the one thing that I really preach inside of government and when it comes to the business side is you want to make, I mean, people can do business anywhere they want to.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to make sure you're business friendly and on the regulatory side, folks don't know what they don't know. And I run into that. And even myself, sometimes I go, well, I didn't know about that one. And you're always coming across some little weird rule. Here's a good example of a weird rule. You know that that gyms that hold memberships, like membership gyms, is required to register with with the Health Club Registration Act in Virginia.
Never heard of the Health Club Registration Act. Yeah.
Yep. So guess what? Fortunately, I worked with some folks that educated me on me, but that's not known by probably the majority of gym owners. And there's a hefty fine that comes with every month that you're out of compliance for ever how many members you have. A significant fine. And so like there's things like that are always popping up. So the stuff you're doing and the work you're doing, because I read your post or you're dialing in your messaging and all those things and you're educating like you and I talked about. But think about that sometimes, Billy. And for the folks that's listening, this is your business little tip of the day about finding the people that are kind of have the audience that you're trying to reach and working with them and providing them with value that helps them, especially in this case. The government has the opportunity, or whoever that person is or department is you're working with has that opportunity to say, "Hey, let's get this out to everyone. Let's let everyone know what Billy does." But they don't have the content, you do. So give them something that they can provide. You have your email on there. If you have questions about this, here's somebody you can connect with or whatever. They might tell you no, but heck, I've been thrown out of places before too, right?
Be absolute. Sometimes we're thrown out together. Uh,
That's
you
right.
know,
Yeah, I've been thrown out together.
I do see where you're coming from because we kind of had the same thing in my previous job where, especially when we go out to do like fire inspections or safety inspections, and, you know, they wouldn't have the correct fire extinguishers, or there wouldn't be the correct distances, or the shelf wouldn't have the shelving. It's got to be so much travel distance to an exit. They would not know that. And the other one that really hit me was a lot was the tier two, what's called the tier two reportings under the CERCLA laws, is that if you have certain product and you have certain reportable quantities, you have to report that to the local government. Uh, and very few places done it.
Yeah.
Uh, but yet it was something that was very important. It's actually federal law, but they didn't do it because they were just trying to be obstinate. They didn't do it because they didn't know they were supposed to do it. Nobody had ever told them. And I remember where this really shined a light on me. I was kind of like when I was learning it and really kind of drill down in it. It was like, well, you know, I don't know if they're supposed to report either. They send a report, I put it in a book and I put it in, in a database, and then I'd have somebody call and say, well, look, Jeff Robertson sent his report in on, gasoline. Am I supposed to send one in too? Well, heck, I don't know. Because I didn't know the report, the parameters you had to do that, and I since learned them, and I think a good a good kind of analogy to one you had is, have you ever went in a hardware store or you know a home improvement store and seen buckets of paint bigger than 5 gallons?
Paint bigger than five?
Yeah,
No, no.
it's because they can't sell them. And so there is certain stores that can, but your typical Home Depot and Lowe's and your mom and pop hardware stores cannot do that.
Mm-mm.
And what had happened several years ago, and I say several years ago, probably 25 years ago, uh, there was one of these national chains came out with 6-gallon buckets of paint, but they're going to sell it for 5-gallon price. Well, they got fined a ton of money because they were advertising on TV and all this
Yeah.
stuff. And the wrong person saw the advertisement and go like, dude, you can't do that. You can't sell 6 gallons of paint in one container. So they end up having to destroy all this stuff. So that's one of the things that most people don't know.
So I can see that coming out of COVID. There's a couple things I was going to tell you. First off, when I separated from the county, one of the first jobs I landed was Home Depot doing freight. So I knew I can tell you what I can tell you what everything, how heavy everything is in there. We had to move paint like that. We didn't have to move any more than 5 gallons because this stuff was
yeah,
heavy. The other thing, COVID created this shortage. I was at work with Kenny. We made hand sanitizer to Kenny had a
oh yeah,
gas license, so we made hand sanitizer because we could get the products in. But what would happen is we would start off with this bottle. We started off with this bottle until it got empty done. They quit all the plastics and all that stuff where the boats weren't floating from overseas. That's why, like when you go to get ketchup, you're like, why we got ketchup in this bottle? Or you started getting caps, started changing on a lot of the things you were using. It created a shortage. So people were pivoting into where you normally bought this size or whatever. They couldn't get the container. A lot of your soft drinks went to those thin cylinder ones because they had so many of them. So it turned over a lot of product. But I could see those folks being like, "Well, we'll just do 6 gallons of paint. Buy 6 gallon buckets. We'll do that." And then here we are.
well, you brought up a good point there when you talked about getting in large quantities of product, and you talked about now we transfer it to a smaller bottle. Well, that opens up a whole new set of rules. When you transferred it from that shipping container to another container, there's special labeling rules that goes into place when you do that. And just a quick example: if you kept that in your hand and you stayed in immediate work area, it didn't have to be labeled. But the minute you gave that to somebody else, then it had to have a label, certain information on it. So that's stuff that the general public does not know.
Yeah.
That Ferguson Safety Solutions kind of gets out there and provides that information to you. And a lot again, when especially your smaller businesses. Now you take your WalMarts and places like that. They've got probably hundreds of people that all they do is do this kind of stuff. But when Billy Ferguson wants to go down and open up, a steak and shake down on the corner of Winston Road, he's never opened up a steak and shake before. And you trying to abide by the law, but you may not know. And I'll give you another example that I was talking to a colleague here about. Oh, it's been about 2 months ago, and we were out at a business that I was doing some work with, and they were wanting to do some security upgrades, and I don't even remember how the conversation got above how it got around to this, but the guy said to me, he says, we got talking about building restaurants, and I think it was when the Zaxby's was coming into Rocky Mountain. The guy said to me, he said, well, I can't tell you how big it is, but I can tell you how big it ain't going to be. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I guarantee you it's going to be under 5,000 square feet. And I said, why is that? He says, it's over 5,000 square feet. You got to put sprinklers in it. And he says, basically all restaurants will be 4,995 feet.
Yeah.
Because there's different kind of seating, different kind of sprinklers. There's lots of things. But again, your general public does not know that.
I'll tell you who's a good source to Billy is Joey Pugh. He's
That's
done
what I'm
some.
talking about.
That's what I figured. He's done some. And you're on my list of people. Sometimes I'll have if I'm doing SBDC work or if I'm doing some government work or just whoever. But I've had panel openings come up. And they're like, "Man, we need somebody for this panel." And I'm like, "What's for it?" I'm like, "I got somebody." So I called Joey. I'm like, "Hey, I need you to be on this panel." And so he's come in and sat, and he can have his own. Like because especially with just restaurant knowledge and some of the stuff that he does. He just being able to consult with his company that he works for and lean into his knowledge will save you thousands and the repercussions of not doing it right.
Well, he lived that. I mean, for
Yeah.
his career, he lived that in that world. And again, it goes back to I don't think people are trying to be obstinate about, well, I'm just not going to have this. but it's what is required by 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 code. And again, when I go out and speak to people, look, I'm not coming in here telling you got to do this. It's your business. You do
Yeah.
whatever your conscience tells you to do. But I'm telling you what the Code of Virginia or the International Building Code says. And I'll shut up after this point, but I never really realized the importance of all that till one day I get this call from the EPA. And I was in my other career at that time, and I get this call, and they're asking me when the last time that this particular business had turned in these tier 2 reports. And I don't think they turned them in since like 2006. It had been like 10, 12 years since they turned them in. Well, I found out they got a multi-dollar fine for not, because they had an incident there. And basically it's just like anything else, when you have an incident and it gets under investigation, the investigators look for everything. And now they're looking for this right here. And then I found, well, man, somebody is checking on these things, and it is important to have them and stuff. So.
Let's close with this because you got about 20 minutes. I got about an hour's worth of stuff I was going to ask you. Here's what I'd like to know. Two things. Is there any repercussions for like not being compliant in fire code? And then the second one is for the bit, and this is what I used to try to do it when I worked in W-2s and inside of businesses. I'd bring somebody in like yourself that would walk through the building with me and just say, "Hey, fix this, fix that." Like somebody like Joey, but like yourself, to where I would pay them to come in, and it's like, hey, just let me know what you're charging me, but I don't want to be out of compliance. Show me what I need to do to fix. And sometimes it's like, hey, move them put that flammables right here, get that fire extinguisher, have one put right here, and he would just walk through. Our fire extinguisher is always good because we inspected this regularly, but like just a building walkthrough for a business that does not know about this stuff, is that something you can do as well?
Yeah, we can do that. And you asked about repercussions. Certainly, it's repercussions, because one thing you'll hear a lot of localities say is, well, our county hasn't adopted the fire code. Well, counties and cities do not have an option to adopt the fire code. It doesn't matter that the board of supervisors voted on it, the city council voted on it. It is state law. The General Assembly voted on it, and every jurisdiction in Virginia is under the International Fire Code or the State Fire Code of Virginia. What you'll hear sometimes is people saying, well, it's what we voted to accept the fire code. Well, what they actually voted on is who's going to enforce the fire code. Like fire marshal is not required in Virginia. Franklin County is one of the few counties west of Lynchburg that has a fire marshal. Most, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of jurisdictions rely on the state fire marshal. Like, for example, you got Franklin County has a fire marshal. You've got Roanoke County has a fire marshal. But Montgomery County, which is the largest county population-wise this side of Lynchburg, doesn't have a fire marshal.
Did you say Montgomery County?
Montgomery County does not have a county fire marshal. It's enforced by the state fire marshal.
They got the town Blacksburg doesn't have one.
Town of Blacksburg, I think, does have one.
Yeah,
I believe,
I
but the county
because
does.
you got Tech, you got
Yeah,
proximity university. That's
yeah,
interesting.
but and you don't have to have a fire marshal. But if you do have a fire marshal, then what they're doing is they are the ones that enforce the fire code. Like the state fire marshal, unless it falls under life safety code, like a jail, a hospital, nursing home, something like that, where the state fire marshal is going to come and inspect it, regardless of what you do at the local level. The state fire marshal is not going to come and inspect McDonald's in Franklin County because that's the locality's responsibility. So a lot of times that's what it is, and that's a long way of saying, yes, the state fire prevention code is law that has not only fines attached, but can have jail time attached to it. Class 1 misdemeanor is punished with a $2,500 fine or 6 months in jail and or both. That people may not realize that if I'm not hanging this fire extinguisher, or I didn't hang it 36 inches off the floor, or I chained this door shut, those have law behind them. They're codified and have law. Now, the opposite end of that is you'll hear people sometimes refer to NFPA. NFPA is not law. NFPA is a standard, and there's very few standards that are codified in law. And the one that comes to most to the forefront is the FAA standards. FAA standards, Federal Aviation Administration, they are codified into law.
Yeah.
But like NFPA, it's just recommendations, it's standards. Now, where you've got to be careful with that, Jeff, is, and I will shut up, I promise, after this,
You
is
good?
that, you know, if you're not going by certain NFPA standard and something goes wrong and we go to court, well, me as a prosecuting attorney, I'm gonna come and go, well, Jeff or Mr. Robertson, I've got the NFPA 1500 code here that deals with X. Now, here's 20 experts that have signed off on this, and 95% of the fire departments in the nation go by this code. What do you know that they don't? Help us enlighten us here.
Yeah, that's
What do
right.
you know that, because we want to get these other 95% on board. So, that still pulls a lot of weight, even though it's not codified.
Yeah. No, I can see that. So, folks, if you don't do anything else, just connect, and you got some good opportunities. I think and I can help you craft that, that message. Here's what I was going to ask you. I've been following. If you go back 3 episodes ago, we got deep into the LA fires.
Mhm.
And I wanted to recap a little bit of things, and where I put it on kind of a little to-do list that I keep for us on where my brain gets going. Because here's what I would say: I never, in my government side of work, I never got to where I was in that kind of that intermingling with some of your higher echelons, your county administrators. Like I'm friends with a lot of them now, but as in a different capacity as a business advisor that's helped their folks or spoke for them or whatever that might be. But you've been in a unique situation. This is where I want to pick your brain. So we went back to just a recap: LA fires, mayor's out of town, off watch. The reservoirs are empty. You got the lady at the water thing, so that's her role, and then we got our fire chief. And our fire chief is tasked with putting out the fire. But you've got some inefficiencies that led up to that. Billy, I don't. I understand there's going to be accountability, but they fired the fire chief, but they didn't. They didn't offboard and free up the future of the lady that was in charge of keeping the reservoirs full. Um, any insight from you, just because you've been a little closer in those decisions, that why a county administrator, in this case a mayor, would um, fire one and not all. It kind of left me confused on whether some internal whatevers, but and then here's the thing that came. I was just reading. I didn't realize this. Like um, she appealed on March 4th, and they denied it. She was the fire chief was appealing to get her position back, and the council denied it. And they've already, they got a temporary in there, or what have you. And so anyway, there's this. I look at this, and so I was going to ask you about that, of your opinion on, why just the one person. It seems like there's a lot of folks that needed to be. There's a little bit of accountability there of, um, I think that they all shared maybe.
That's a good question, a good point. I think it would have to be drilled down into a little bit deeper. Uh, I think that the first thing that kind of jumped out to me on that, even before the fallout, and you and I had discussed about fallout, even on the second chance, but also texting back and forth, is I think there was some conflict there, was some tension between the mayor and the fire chief previous to that. But I think there's also a difference in the department head responsibility, and that would be what the county policy for Los Angeles County said. I can speak for my jurisdiction. One of my duties was that basically anything that is going to be reported on the news tomorrow morning, I was to let the county administrations know as soon as I knew, or as soon as thereafter I knew, they didn't want to wake up and turn the news on in the morning and see that, half of Franklin County had burnt down. And the first thing they're seeing is on the news. They wanted me to call them, whether it's, 10 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning. Uh, and I think that may have been the difference because, if the library had came up missing some books, they probably wouldn't have expected the librarian to call and report that. But if the library was on fire, they probably expected me to call and tell them the library is on fire. So that may have been a little bit different in why the water department person wasn't terminated. I think that I think with the LA County Fire, they certainly was at a disadvantage from the start of that because they had, from my understanding, they had already identified insufficient water in parts of that area, and some staffing issues, maybe some apparatus issues. And I think that's lots of localities go by that and keep putting it off and putting it off. I could name several localities as we speak today that are probably would be in the same position LA County was in at that. Now, the other thing, Jeff, as far as uh, city council not listening to the chief's grievance there, and I know a county the size of LA County, they're probably unionized and have a union that opens up a whole different thing than what I'm used to. But when I was the chief here, I served at the pleasure of the county administrator. I did not have a grievance procedure. He couldn't discriminate against me, but if he liked the Dallas Cowboys and I liked the Washington Redskins, he could terminate me, and it wasn't anything I could do about it. You knew that going in. So unless it was discrimination, I didn't have a grievance procedure. So if I'd have been terminated and wanted to grieve it, I'd have had to done it through the legal system, not through a grievance procedure. I'd had to went and obtained attorneys and went that route. Fortunately, I was able to retire, and I never got terminated for anything, but never been terminated from anything. But that may have played a little part in that. But I would feel comfortable in saying and have a high level of confidence that we haven't heard the last of that, because I think it will that will go to the legal system, certainly to the LA County.
So let me coattail. Just you took me right where I was going to tell you because I looked it up. So the member with the water department lady, she was doing $750,000 was her salary, which was like a big deal. But here's the department's been implicated in lawsuits over its handling of water resources during the fires, prompting the LADWP board to approve $10 million contract with a law firm to defend against the claims. So her department, she's still on there, but then um, there are multiple lawsuits filed against the water department, but none against the fire department. The water department is getting the lawsuits. So when you look, I know it's hard to sue the fire department in this case because they're responders and there's some laws that are in protection for that. So they're suing they're suing just for the inadequacies that had been left there. So I was just curious, like, um, I don't know if you've ever been in I don't know if there's heads has ever rolled in our departments, like it ever come up. I'm probably one of few that rolled. Um, but so I don't, when you look at that, but my curiosity was, uh, because like the mayor's statement on this from a leadership side of looking at accountability, and I think it goes a long way of being able to stand up and go, hey, I shouldn't have been out. I knew this was going on. This was scheduled. We had people in place. My eyes were off. Obviously all the things. But she was like, I'm not. I'm going to hold the person accountable that let me go. And I was that one kind of took me back a little bit too, just from a leadership accountability side. And I don't, you've worked in the public sector way longer than me, but there's been no point of leadership that I've ever learned to where I'm taught to finger point.
Agreed. I think that where that again, we haven't heard the end of this, and I think that that fire chief could only present to the mayor and the board of what their shortfalls were. She couldn't force them to hire people. She couldn't force them to do water. So if she's got records, and I would feel confident she does, when FOIA requests start getting to be filed for her emails or for her speaking engagements and stuff like that, I think that she's going to be very well protected, uh, provided she did what she said she did, and she's going to come out of there pretty clean. Now, going back to the water person, I would say, and I'm trying not to get you and I in trouble with LA County, and we get extradited here in a day or two. But
You
I
can't
think,
hard to talk in California. You do a weekend in county for telling your mind.
what's that, buddy?
I said you do a weekend in county jail in California for speaking your mind.
That's it. So I think that what you may see is that the water department head will be relieved of employment at some point. But I think that while these lawsuits is going on, uh, that the longer they keep her employed, the more it puts the impetus of the failure on her
Yeah,
and not the mayor.
that's a great
And
point.
the mayor is looking for a somebody to point the finger at later down the road. Where if you terminate her right now, that may come back to you may win the battle but lose the war
Yeah,
uh, going
I
forward.
understand.
And I think
That's a great point.
I think that's what
That's a
you're
really
looking
good
at right
point.
now.
Here's what was on my brain, like back in your person, right? And that's we had to do that. I've been backed. I've been backed a handful of times. I'm like, hey, this is our guy. He made a mistake, or but the mistake didn't rise to the occasion of where we are now. But also, um, just in like the fire chief. This is where I was kind of going back to like, all right, there's something else that we're missing here because she's someone like in all the facts that I've seen and just reading about it and just kind of in the scroll and what I've kept up with. As if I was, if there's anybody that I feel like I could back in this scenario, it would be her. Be like, hey, she did her job. She responded based on what she had. She had all her things. She did this. They went to work. They called in resources. They followed policy. If there's anyone that I felt confident that I could say, all right, we'll back my chief. Um, that's why I was like kind of dumbfounded when I was like, oh, they're going. I mean, somebody's going to be held accountable. I have no doubt. And then I think the chief in general bore some negative press from some of the comments on the videos that they had made about carrying um, the one video where the firefighters like, oh yeah, if he's a man, he shouldn't have been in that situation anyway. I'm like, whoa, that's not the right thing to say. And just but knowing understanding EMS, sometimes those are you make those funny comments in your bay, but you don't necessarily want to put that in video that's going to be publicly broadcast, right? It's just a joke that sometimes is um, passed along inside of those public safety things, just about how hard that job can be sometimes trying to rescue people. But so that's why I was like, I didn't understand why the fire chief was one of the first to go in this situation.
I'm not sure I do either, but I will echo what you said about that comment, and also the comment. I don't know if you've seen it, but there was a national news reporter that asked the fire chief, "Did the mayor fail her in her time of need?" And her answer was yes. I would have probably not said that on camera, even though
That's
that would have been my thoughts, because that's kind of sealing your own fate right there. I think that we may have had some spirited discussions behind closed doors, but not on national TV. Uh,
yeah. Oh
and,
yeah, yeah. We'd been we wouldn't have wanted to be hot mic there. We'd have been it would have been
yeah,
on like neck bone because
yeah,
we'd
I
been
think
throwing
that
down.
she could have maybe reworded that a little bit, and I think that just threw gasoline onto the fire. And again, I think it goes back to there was some tension between those two even before that, from what I understood. And the end result is I don't think nobody's going to win this. I think the citizens of LA County is certainly not going to win. I would say that that fire chief will land on her feet somewhere better.
Speaking
Or
circuit, I mean, heck, she'll do good, even
yeah,
if she never goes back into the thing. Because there's a story there, Billy. It's a heck
right,
of a
absolutely. Well, we and I'm reflecting back to one of the other stories. Hey, New Orleans
yeah,
police chief, she landed on her feet pretty well when she was terminated from Oakland.
yeah.
You know, but there's a story there, and there's the circles on TV, and but I think we can have a conversation probably a year from now. Then there'll be a new mayor in L.A. I think that we will see that too when everything is said and done.
Yeah, there's where she's been where somebody had recorded some other stuff too. There's some noise out there on that. Folks want to consume that. um, there's some other stuff that's out there. I was just that was on my brain. That's why I put that on our topic. I got something else. and we'll save it. But it kind of teased me up to be able to continue this conversation about how government um, interacts with public safety, whether it be fire department, EMS, and law enforcement. And sometimes, and we're right on top of the hour. I got to end on time tonight, but the sometimes those three departments end up being kind of the scapegoat in some cases, and that's what I was going to kind of tell you about the some takes and some guys I've talked to and just different folks on um, some of the other law enforcement incidents that's going on to where, in my opinion, you know, there's a huge amount of government failures in um, just in how they process economy, how we've turned how we've let crime kind of take hold in um, a lot of areas, and we've flowed fentanyl and opioids into every neighborhood. Mine, growing up with you, it's we're all hit hard with that, and um, when the negative stuff comes with that, Billy, the first thing we do is we when law enforcement has to react in a negative way, gunshots, having to arrest a bad car, person gets. You see the downside of law enforcement having to use the force, and then it becomes excessive because it's they're trying to control the person and they're over outpunting their training in a lot of cases, but a lot of sometimes it excuse me, it puzzles me to why we that's overlooked, right? They give us that moment and everybody's like, we're going let's make a stance on this, or let's ride, or let's do this, but we overlook the fact that we wouldn't have been in this situation if the folks that we entrust to lead our communities um, would have curtailed some of these issues that create those moments. And that's what I want to tee us up for, kind of out of this, where it sounds like this moment was created, whether through inefficiencies or whatever. They had what they had, no water, all that stuff. But then it leads to we grab I'm not saying she's like has done this stellar job by no means, but I'm just saying it seems like the fire chief is like that we grabbed that she went out earlier. I'm not saying she wasn't going to go out at all, but so it takes me into other things. That's where it's been kind of prodding at me a little bit on just how a lot of times this little minute failure that stacks into all these other little things, and you have this hotbed of crime, and then you throw opioids and drugs, and that starts to really poison and erode a community in there, and then what's judged is the reaction to law enforcement having to act. And or in the fire department having to act. So that's been on my mind. So I just wanted to tee you up for what I'd like to talk about in 2 weeks,
Okay.
and then and to get your brain working along the same side, and then how that all kind of compounds, because it, it's crazy, and just knowing some of these guys that's been affected on the other side, people who were born to help, who love to help, who've spent their entire careers helping get put in these situations where I feel like there's other layers of accountability that ends up in that responder's lap. I just like to that's what we'll talk about in a couple of weeks outside some business stuff if you want to.
It sounds good to me, and I will leave you with this thought on that. I think that a lot of that comes back to there's probably no higher profile position in the communities other than fire and police.
Yeah.
We get the most money to operate. We're out there in the limelight or in the negative light. So I think that's where the we're going to be the first to fall when things don't go right. So I think that leads a little bit to that. But I think I know where you're going with what you're teeing us up with for next time. And, I think that will shed some more light on where we're leaving it tonight, some of the thought process. I hope everybody will join us in 2 weeks. And
No, man, I want to share it because I value your opinion on the stuff. You're the guy that has taught me a lot and helped me approach things from a different view. And, um, 20 year ago, Jeff couldn't have this conversation because I was, in a whole different space in my head, but it really piques my curiosity. And I want to, in my head, Billy, this conversation gets to live forever. And there's a young EMS and police guy who's going to come up and he's going to stumble upon this episode, and it's going to be like, it's something really good to think about as I'm approaching this, or these guys I know talked about this at one point in time. So I think just us kind of just prodding each other's brain a little bit on, and just kind of peeling back some of the layers on of all areas of the work that we've been able to do is something that I think would be really cool to keep building off of that episode, because it did, like I said, just to leave you with this. I was like, fire, why do I get it, but why now? Was it coming? Yeah, maybe, but it left my and maybe between now and then too, there'll be some other realizations come out on what kind of her exit reason plan, or why that was, and what the decision making was behind it. So maybe we'll come back with some more information too. So
sounds good. I got to put a plug in for Ferguson Safety Solutions. We can help anybody out. Just give us a email.
take 37 minutes and tell them your email address, Billy.
Well, I'm going to do the first one first. wferguson62@gmail.com, or as Jeff likes to say, william.ferguson@fergusonsafetysolutions.com. Or you can find us on LinkedIn or Facebook. So, Jeff, thanks for the opportunity, buddy.
Yeah, man. Let's loop back in, Billy, on that business stuff tomorrow or this weekend, and let me just give you some other insights on that, dude. Thanks for being with me, folks. Be sure to like, share, comment, follow along. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Sounds great. Thank you.